The one thing I was really concerned about tonight is I did not want this to be like, all right, everybody, here's dinner. Now tell me about how awesome I am. Let's just be straightforward. Like, I get it. I get to see everybody's miracles. Like, I know what happens. I also know that my obsessive level of studying, like, beyond what is reasonable for most people, I realize that there's a net gain for that. Those skill sets matter, that there's material to that. That brings forth some form of clinical application. There are things that happen because of that, right? So this is not about like, hey, I want you to tell me your story because I know your stories. I personally invited each of you to be here. I want you to tell your story just so that you have a stage, you have presence, you have a, maybe somebody else around this has a similar story, be like, oh, cool, and you can make a connection about that. So one of the things about merchandising that I was always tentative about is I didn't want to be like, hey everybody, come see how good I look, you know? I didn't want that to be like a tribute to me because this is you know, all of my teachers showed up in my life for a reason, right? Amen. So they showed up in my life for a reason, at the right time, for the right reasons, and things just happened to fall into line. For as much as I was like, I have an idea, I'm like, here's the other idea. Like, oh, well, that's where I'm going, that way. So I've been steered. So this has never been a monument to me, nor do I ever want it to be that. My ultimate goal is the people that aren't in this room, the people that haven't had this opportunity to even know that this exists. I mean, show of hands, before you met me, how many of you knew that this was available? Right.
What was available?
The process, the awesome, right? Right. Right. What's that? Right. Sort of like, I know it's out there somewhere. Right. So the point is, I'm really looking forward to sharing this with other people. So without further ado, who wants to be our first volunteer? Spike?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. You can do it.
All right. Hello, everybody. Dan is my name, actually.
Hi, Spike.
They call me Spike. But, it was a couple years ago. I'll start at the beginning. 22 years ago, I was in a car accident. Broke my wrist. It was like 7 chunks taken out. It was horrible. The recovery was bad. I was supposed to do some physical therapy, but it hurt so bad. I couldn't put any pressure on it, so I skipped the physical therapy. I'm like, it'll get better on its own, and it never did. So I suffered 22, 23 years without being able to make like a fist, without putting like any pressure on this thing. Like to do a push-up, I couldn't do it. 25 pounds later, here I am, getting lazier and lazier. But not only the physical part of it, but the pain was. It wasn't like a pain where I'm like, ow, 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 ow. It was just like, oh God, I just wish this. It was like nagging every day, like sometimes 12, 15 hours a day. I would be like, oh, I don't want to take any more aspirin. It's just killing me. So, but I felt like there was a lot of scar tissue in here. So when I got to know Dr. Danny, I'm like, can you do anything with the scar tissue? Maybe give me a little bit more range of motion or something like that. And I would say about 2-3 minutes later, he had me do, his Dr. Danny stuff. So a couple of these, he's like, all right, how's that feel? I'm like, what do you mean, how's that feel? Like,
What a rip-off!
But then he's like, no, like, how does it feel? I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, my hand turned like this for 20-some years. Now, it lays flat. No pain, nothing. Look, push down, I can bend it back.
Now do some push-ups.
I witnessed it too. He was so amazed.
Now, when I was like picking up buckets, I'm like, look at me go. And it's been unbelievable. Like I'll be sitting on the floor with the kids, and I can actually turn over and actually push myself. Like, wow, it was literally life-changing. And zero pain. Like, I'm talking zero from that moment on.
Yep.
Where did that, if you would recall, where did that treatment take place?
in the Steve studio. Yeah, just, because I said, can I make an appointment? Come in? He's like, just over here, come over here. And then I think my next question was like, okay, this feels awesome. Like, how do I maintain this?
Exactly.
And he's like, you're done.
like,
It's done.
tomorrow
I
is
fixed
gonna
it
be
like
back.
forever.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean you fixed it forever? Like, I've been here for like 2.5 minutes now. And then I think he said, the pain isn't here, it was all up here. Took it away, and it's been fantastic. So Thank you very much.
What's that?
I'll share a story about my daughter, actually, because this was early on when I had just started to see Dr. Danny, and she was a swimmer at Libertyville High School, and she had jumped in the pool, did something to her shoulder, and she couldn't raise her hand over her head anymore. So obviously that's, you know, the main motion you have when you're a swimmer. And she was out, you know, working with the trainer and all of that for a couple weeks, and just, you know, really bummed out she couldn't compete anymore. And I said, why don't you go see my guy? And she's like, well, I don't know, Mom, I don't know. And so I actually was out of town. I sent her to see Dr. Danny. She was a little bit nervous. And he did his Dr. Danny thing, as you say. And it was like, I called her after the appointment. I said, how are you feeling? She said, that was the weirdest thing ever. He's a witch doctor. And she goes, literally, he like touched me on the head and he touched me on the ear and he tapped me somewhere else, and all of a sudden I could raise my arm up and I could move again, and it feels amazing. And she was back in the pool the next day and finished her season, and she's still a believer. Big fan.
Which, let me just tell you, from my perspective, my favorite thing is when people try to explain what happened. Because I'm like, that's not at all how that works. But it's really funny because, like, for me, it's just like, I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's an neurolymphatic reflex point for the spleen meridian. I'm gonna go and rub on that. And people are like, yeah, it was weird. It's just all this hand drive. We're doing this thing. Boom, done. I was like, all right. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so Dan is a dancer, I dance, and a friend of mine, which is a friend of yours, Beata. Okay, you told Beata about him. Beata told me about him. And the reason I came to him really was ultimately going to be for my daughter, who was going to be sick a year later. Okay, so I came to see Dr. Danny, and I have had experience with people who are a little different in this realm, but not exactly quite like him. He's at the far end.
I mean, there's weird, and then there's like Dr. Danny weird. There's like a couple of. I mean, go ahead.
But it was a great match because I could relate to some of the stuff, and I knew what you were doing in some ways. Although, like I said, you know, that was a little bit different. Okay, so for me, it was really small stuff. Like I had a horseback riding accident, and I cracked a little rib in the back of my back here, and that was 5 years ago, and it was hurting, but you know, I kind of sucked it up. But I don't really like having pain, so I figured you could maybe do something about it. And then I also picked up with some dizzy spells. Not a lot, but enough to take me out for a day or two. And that is not okay. So you worked with me, and it didn't take a long time, and I was better, you know. And I knew that you had a lot of gifts that most people can't even dream about. And you were funny too, and nice, and cuddly, and sweet. Anyway, okay.
Is it blushy in here? Or is that just
Anyway, so.
No, go ahead. I mean, any more like that? I mean, I'm open. Sorry.
And so when I have all, you know, everybody has some issues, physical, mental, emotional, and I'm surrounded by all those people. We all are, I suppose, at some point or another. So I would recommend them to see Dr. Danny, but I had to give them a warning. He's a little unusual. Really unusual, but he's really, really good, so give it a try. Okay? And then last year, my youngest, who's in college, who's amazing in so many ways, she got really sick. She was having digestive issues. She had colonoscopy at the age of 20, and then she had some very serious emotional issues, mental emotional issues. And she was in PHP, what is it?
Partial hospitalization program.
Right, after school, like last June, and she was seeing a psychiatrist, she was seeing a counselor, she was in classes, she was on 5 meds, I think 5 meds, and that's like way over the top. And she wasn't getting any better. And that was pretty much all summer. And I was hesitant to offer up Dr. Danny, but we're desperate. We were desperate. And so I mentioned to Nomi about this, and I said, look, you're supposed to go back to school in like 4 weeks, and you're in bed, and you're not functioning, you lost 30 pounds. You're amazing, but you need to get better, so how about you try seeing Dr. Danny? And it's something a little more unusual. It's not a regular chiropractic thing. It's called brain training. And I said, I'll do it also, because I hadn't done brain training. I said, but you do it and I'll do it at the same time, you know, one after the other. And she went in, I'll never forget, she came out crying. Her face was all red. She said to me, he knew everything about me and I never said a word. So I already knew about that. I mean, I figured that was part of the deal. But, and she says, I'll go back. And she went the next day. And after that, she came out smiling. She started to eat. And we had 3 more sessions in the next 2 weeks. And then after that last session, I took her straight to college. Wow.
Yeah.
What's that?
I want some brain training with that.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wait till you hear this.
Yeah.